You can see that a full 40% of our spending is really on emergency services. More than 40% is on emergency services. So the total recommended levy for 2020 is just over $420 million. And that compares to 2019, where the approved levy was $415 million. This is one of my favorite charts. This blue line is actually the tax increases, or as you can see, in some cases, tax decreases that have happened between 2008 and 2019. This red line is what the impact of the tax rate would have been had we increased every year 2%. Over the years, over 2008 to 2019, there has been over a $750 million cumulative savings to the residents in the City of Windsor. And on an ongoing basis, $97 million annual savings because of the discipline that was employed by City Council and City Administration. So on the high end, the City of Brampton has had huge tax levy increases, 87.2% over that time period. The average is 48.3%. The City of Windsor has been 3.6%. Again, discipline in our spending. If you look at just the average 12,000 or 1,200 square foot home in the City of Windsor, you have assessed values here. There's the provincial average. Here are the tax rates that are employed provincially and in the city. And so the average property tax rate in the City of Windsor is about $3,295 a year for the average homeowner, compared to the provincial average of $4,066. So if you look at the overall changes here in the City of Windsor, if you add in water and wastewater, you're looking at an average burden to the taxpayers of $4,569, compared to the provincial average of $5,182. So people who live in the City of Windsor, compared to the provincial average, pay about $613 a year less than the average in the province when you add water and sewer in. You look at this particular graph and then you look at the black line. The black line is a tax-funded debt. By 2021, we will have no tax-funded debt remaining. So the debt that you see remaining to 2023 is debt that is paid for by other sources. And let me give you an example. If you looked at the Meadowbrook development that we're building, there is $12 million in debt that is held by the Housing Authority but shows up on our balance sheet. And all of that debt is serviced by the rents that are collected from the tenants. The province is mandating municipalities, especially municipalities our size, to come up with asset management plans. How are you going to maintain the assets that you have, whether they're roads, sewers, whether they're bridges, whether they're parks and playgrounds? Everything that you have, we have to come up with a plan on how we're going to maintain those things. And so the province is saying, show us how you're going to do it, and then come up with a plan to fund it. And it's in regulation. It calls for a 1.16% increase, 1.16% increase every year for 6 years. And that puts us in a position to be able to sustain the assets that we have. This year we're moving to an 8-year capital budget. Every year we've added one. We used to just do 5, so a few years ago we started with 6. The province is making us get to 10. So we're at year 8. Next year we'll go to year 9, and then we'll be in year 10. This is something that will be very, very noticeable to residents in the community with the amount of construction that will be happening.
We have introduced a new reserve fund which is dedicated to service sustainability of roads, sewers, and so forth. So whereas in the past, the capital budget funding was available to fund new projects as well as enhancing or maintaining the current infrastructure that we have taken the step now to segregate the funding so that we know year to year how much is going into service sustainability. So we know how much we can spend on roads to keep them at a certain level, and it's not competing with new projects that may take money away from that.
The question you're going to ask on the capital budget, what are the main projects that you're going to see included in this capital budget? And there are many, many that are included. Some of the highlights certainly are reconstruction of Banwell from Tecumseh to Mulberry, including the installation of a roundabout. Howard and South Cameron, or Howard and West Grand, as some would call it. This budget has funding to move forward on the design and construction of a new intersection there. You'll see continued investment in Northwood to Taunton, sections of the central box. So we're looking at the reconstruction of Dominion from Northwood North all the way to Taunton. You will also notice multiple sections of EC Row are included. And so a lot of on-ramp, off-ramp improvements along really the whole length of EC Row. You're going to start seeing a lot of work happen with the on and off ramps there. Lozon Parkway from EC Row to Tecumseh. And so that is a section that's very well used. It's in a bit rough shape, and it's a fair amount of money to do this work, but you see the money in the budget to actually undertake that. We actually will have now the ability to replace playgrounds when they're removed. We're also going to implement the 7-year tree trimming cycle to manage canopy reduction and reduce the number of 311 calls. So when we monitor on a monthly basis the types of calls that are coming to 311, almost every ward and almost every month, especially from spring to fall, we see a lot of complaints coming into 311 about tree trimming. You're all well aware of the Peace Fountain and the work we want to do out there, so there is funding to fix the existing Peace Fountain. There's rehabilitation and replacement of park benches and that new program. There's also a significant increase rather in funding for municipal pool rehab to keep them operational. Parking lot improvements at WFCU, Willisted, and Huron Lodge. The number one intersection in the city where we have collisions and incidents is really Lausanne Parkway and 42. We want to make it better. And you'll see money allocated in this budget for Lausanne Parkway and the intersection realignment and utility and construction funding at that particular intersection. And so again, 2020 recommended capital budget is proposed without the issuance of any long-term debt. Long-term debt will be falling dramatically to $41 million by 2023. By 2021, all of the taxpayer-supported debt is gone. And as we move to an 8-year capital budget, you'll see about $150 million spent on the capital side every year over the 8 years, and a total of $1.2 billion.
On the City of Windsor departmental budget, there is a recommended property tax levy increase of 1.2%. Then, as indicated, the approved asset management plan that was approved by City Council earlier this year calls for a funding amount for the asset management plan of an additional 1.2%, essentially 1.16, rounded to 1.2 in terms of the documents that you have in front of you, so 1.16 increase. And finally, the agencies, boards, and committees reflect an increase of an additional 1.2%. So when you add all those three together, it's essentially 3.56% or 3.6 rounded in terms of the property tax levy increase that is before council for consideration relative to the 2020 budget.
As I said last year, whatever the number was last year, maybe 3% or whatever you proposed, I said it'll be lower. And so the commitment I made is at or around the rate of inflation, and so that is the goal. The asset management plan this year, when we start at 1.16, certainly makes that a challenge. But we know we have to, because of Ontario regulation, we have to move forward with this asset management plan. There is some room to work in here, to maneuver here, but it's a little tighter this year than it was last year from my analysis of the budget so far. But my goal is to get it down to a more reasonable level.